Today, it's
I'm also
sometimes
smoking
not
weed.
so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to
Dude,
Sweden, where 2 weeks
before
ago
you
the
right into
government
Europe, you're
convicted
like,
a
none of
Christian
this fucking
activist
progressive
for
bullshit anymore.
participating
Like,
in Koran burnings that
no
resulted
more
in
thought
his
police,
friend's
fucking
murder.
asshole.
And as the judge in his
Yeah,
case
this speech
chillingly
is
noted,
crazy, man.
Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has
Pause this for
placed the
one
basic
second.
liberties of
I just
religious
love,
Britons in
this is what,
particular
okay, this
in the crosshairs.
is what I want to
A
talk
little
about
over
with
2 years ago, the
power
British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a
on
51-year
policy. Um, the top of his agenda. Okay, so he shows up to the security conference. They think he's going to talk about Ukraine. They think he's going to like announce new funding to help Ukraine. And the only thing he fucking talks about is like, I can't post anti-feminist shit on Twitter because of your fucking dumbass EU regulations. Like, so, you gotta let people post, man. You can't be You can't be like censoring people's like COVID opinions or like fucking who they want to vote for their fucking president. Like, it's just so funny to me that like this is like he's he's building up a base of people from our generation. Like this speech was not popular. The Germans hated it. A lot of people saw it as a diplomatic failure, but it's like he's building up his base over time of people who understand how important internet freedom is and like the ability to speak your mind and like call out bullshit and like comment on the news of the day. Like I think he's really gearing to that long term. I think you're totally right. He's going to be the next president after Trump. He's probably going to have a long and successful tenure himself because like he's actually pretty popular in Washington. He does like a lot of bipartisan shit with like Lena Khan and Ro Khanna and like all these liberal Democratic senators who like also don't like big tech centralization. Anyway,
Yeah. I mean, I
yeah,
think it's an important point he's making. I've seen some of the stuff going down in the UK with people getting sent to jail just for like tweeting something, and I'm like, "Whoa, yeah. Europeans European governments should be made aware that their own people are very concerned about that type of stuff. A lot of people are very concerned about that. A lot of Europeans, I think, are very concerned about where Europe is heading right now and where a lot of the current dominant ideologies in Europe, many of which are kind of connected to, you know, various strains of uh, identity politics that has, been eroding Europe from within to a degree similar to in the United States. It's been a kind of toxic ideology, I would say overall. That's we were kind of talking about that earlier. It's wasted a lot of time.
I thought something fascinating that really gave me an insight into European popular politics was like when Black Lives Matter was happening in the United States in 2020.
Mm.
There were all these protests in the United States, which made sense, but there were also big protests in Europe. And I was asking myself the question, like, why are people in Europe, like in France, like going out in the streets to protest an act of violence that happened in like a totally different country, like with a totally different population and totally different set of police. Like,
Mm.
and it made me realize that like a lot of Europe just seems like it's part of the greater world order liberal establishment ecosystem. Like Brussels is where like a lot of like, DEI, don't know, like it's fucking liberal. Europe's a liberal fucking place. Bunch of libtards out there.
I mean, yeah, I will also say that I think identity politics and wokeism and social justice and these types of movements, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that there's not good stuff in there because I think there is, but there's been a lot of, yeah, a lot of deleterious software included in that software update, or however you want to consider that ideological injection into the Western mind in recent decades, with just the really strong political correctness and the fixation on identity. You end up creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where if what you have is a hammer, then all you see are nails. If you only look at the world through the lens of identity politics and wokeism, then you're actually going to amplify that reality tunnel, and that's going to start to become the consensus reality, where you start to see vastly more problems through that lens because you chose to deeply internalize that lens. And it's like, is that really what we want to be amplifying right now to occupy more of our attention, or are there more pressing concerns? Could we perhaps more rapidly get closer to a peaceful world if we actually stopped super zooming in on our supposed surface level differences, and instead we were just like, hey, what if we just forgot about these notions of what divides us, and we just let ourselves be humans, and everybody's just an individual doing their thing, and who gives a shit about these group categories?
Yeah. So cold outside. I think that's very well spoken.
Your volume went down a fair bit. You're coming through quite a bit quieter.
You know what? I think it's these stupid headphones. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're louder now.
Okay. I'm just wearing these stupid ass broken headphones.
Should we watch more of the speech now? I kind of want to hear more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. This lady got arrested in the UK for praying outside an abortion clinic. After British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before.
This is crazy.
Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution.
I agree with that.
Now, I wish I could say that this was a...
What do you want to say about that?
I actually agree with that. I think they made a good call there. I think it's fucked up that people do shit like that, protest abortion clinics.
Praying outside of an abortion clinic?
Well, they're I think it's fucked up.
Fair enough.
And they passed a law specifically against doing that. So
yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think saying a prayer somewhere, I would have to see more context to know, I think I'm in favor of people being able to pray about anywhere, but yeah, it depends on more contextual details.
I don't know. Whatever.
Crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizen suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth.
Wow.
So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town.
Ooh.
And under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Wait, what did you say there? I missed that part. Sheriff in town.
In the public, will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now,
it's crazy that he actually got some applause on this speech. I would have thought like everyone in the room would be too scared to applaud, honestly. Like, just for fear, like, dude, for fear of the woke mob crashing down. Like, yeah, this is a crazy speech though. Like the fact that he went in there like a wrecking ball like this. Just again, I like to set aside the content of what is happening and just look at like from a perspective of sheer raw kind of masculine courage and strength. There's pretty impressive archetypal like levels of bravery happening here. I mean, to walk up into like a room of European leaders and let your mouth speak these words right now, like whether you agree or disagree with the message, like that takes some serious cojones. So I feel like there's some like archetypal activation you can receive from stuff like this without even necessarily having to go into whether you agree or not with the content. Just even absorbing some of that courage, like that's some single-pointed will there that like vast majority of guys ain't got the balls to do what this bro is doing right now, Like
100%. I think you nailed it. He's got that fire, the thymos.
Yeah.
Do you know about thymos?
Thymos. I don't think so.
You have to watch the movie Gladiator 2. It's the best fucking movie of all time. I cried. I re-examined a lot of past trauma for like an hour, and it just like redid my life is basically like a tale of Greek heroism. It's really, really fucking good movie. But thymos is like your inner fire. It's like your spunkiness, I guess. I don't know. It's there's a leak. Yes, that's exactly what I fucking need. Hell yeah. How did I call that? I was gonna go out and find a leak and get some wild scenes. It's crazy.
As I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Now, the good news
most
is that
people
I
aren't
think
clapping.
your democracies are substantially less brittle
like
than many people
guys
apparently
like clapping
fear.
in a room.
And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Woo. Europe faces many challenges,
I can get down with
but the
that.
crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate.
Is he reading off a teleprompter? Like, would you assume he's reading all this off a teleprompter or what?
I'm not watching. I'm listening while playing this game.
Word. Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if he's reading this or not, because it's just, yeah.
It's definitely a written speech. He's not like just improvising it.
Okay, word.
That I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail, whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone. Wow. And of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know the situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk.
What?
But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
Dang. That was a crazy speech. I mean, the fact that he just showed up and gave that speech again just takes massive McNuggets. I don't even know if I have the capacity to really want to go into my individual opinions about different issues. Like I'd say generally though, I have a fair amount of resonance with a lot of what he put forth. I think there's a lot of important points in what he's saying personally.
Yeah. He rules.
What's that?
I think he rules.
You think he rules?
Yeah.
I might play a bit of Asmongold's coverage of this. I want to see what he was saying about it.
Please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance.
All right. Did he give the speech? I haven't heard it.
Well, thank you.
I heard it.
And thanks
clips.
to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the host of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of those who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time
they had a crazy guy drove a truck into, I think it was like 18 people, 30-something people. I'm not really sure exactly. And he was a migrant who had been told to leave, but they didn't get rid of him. And then he killed a kid. I don't know if other people died in the process. 28. Yeah, the numbers were uncertain yesterday.
I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now,
last time he gets massive applause.
I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Bro, he went there just to talk shit about him. I think he's right, by the way. Completely agree with him.
Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election.
Wow.
He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany, too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund
they annulled an election? That seems a little bit,
Support is in the
Wow.
name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to
Canceling elections does not seem democratic. I'll say it. It doesn't.
cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves
I
to an
love
appropriately
Asmongold,
high
dude. This
standard.
guy's
And I say
commentary is classic.
ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God
Nope. Yeah.
they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom.
I think that they lost because they had to censor things. If you have to censor stuff, you've already lost the ideological battle. You've already lost. The fact that you're censoring it is your acknowledgement that you've lost. Like, you know it. Like, if there's that's it.
To surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe.
try,
and we
though.
believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest.
Bro, this is like this is like the first 5 minutes of V for Vendetta. How the fuck does this happen? How are people putting up with that over there? That's insane. Can you invade us, please? I don't know.
Can you invade
No,
us,
that's too much money. You have no choice. Why are people voting for this shit?
The moment they spot
Jeez.
what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this
So the
very
government decides what's hateful or not, and whenever they make that decision, they decide to censor you arbitrarily. And people in Europe are okay with this? Man. Y'all need to throw some tea into the water or some shit. Like, you can't let this happen. Yeah, bro, you're gonna let these clowns boss you around. No, we're not? Well, then organize and get rid of them. Yeah, the people have no say. I don't know about that.
country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet.
Bro, this guy just brought up Gamergate. I love it. Oh my fucking God. Yeah, no guns. I don't even think that it's guns. Like, I mean, Trump didn't win in 2024 because of guns. Like, nobody had to shoot anybody. If anything, I mean, I feel like we're down one, right? Because, like, they shot a Trump supporter.
Chris, what was Gamergate again?
It's a big controversy on the internet. I'm gonna have to log off here though. I've got a group of friends from high school I'm hanging out with here shortly, and gotta grab a little grub before then.
Word up, brah.
Sure, it's
Sounds
getting
good.
late over there too.
Sounds good. No worries.
Yeah, it was fun hanging out, man. Let's do it again next weekend if you're free.
Sounds good, bro. Yeah, I'll be in touch and see how the week flows. But yeah, have a great week. Take good care and yeah, peace out. Be well.
Peace.
in January 6th. So, I mean, you know, I feel like the deep state is +1. But the fact is that, like, yeah, I think I mean, y'all have elections though, right? Like in Europe, you have elections. No? They're rigged?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to believe. I really don't.
A day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder.
There's no way that's true, right? There's no way, right? I really don't.
A day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder.
What? That is not.
There's no way that's true, right? There's no way, right? Oh my God. I'm going to tell you what the outcome of this is going to be. Eventually, one of these countries is going to get so fed up, they're going to elect somebody like Adolf Hitler again. And then when they do, we're going to have another fucking world problem. There's going to be a world-level crisis because it's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen.
That's a pretty crazy prediction.
I feel like it's inevitable, right? I mean, am I fucking crazy?
And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
I am so glad to be an American. Like, this is insane. Oh my God. That's so dumb. Yeah. What he said is true. Sweden is currently cooked. This is awful.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom.
Oh, no.
Where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes.
What?
Dude, like, I feel like people would be spamming if these things weren't true, right? Like, I would have probably seen it if it wasn't true. Because, like, I'm the kind of person, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. These are extraordinary claims. This is outrageous. You have no idea how bad it really is? Oh my God. People just ignore the evidence? Why? We can't do anything? So is Europe just kind of like cooked?
Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion.
What a shithole! Oh my God! You know, I used to criticize like places like Saudi Arabia and Dubai.
One thing you gotta say though is like to say that a whole continent is a shithole based on a couple cherry-picked stories is pretty silly. I mean, I live in Europe. I've lived in Germany for 3 years or so, 3, 4 years, and yeah, I love it here. I love living in the German countryside. You know, it's tragic to hear about what happened in Munich, and I am concerned about an increasing amount of this type of stuff. I do think letting in excess numbers of unvetted immigrants from wildly different cultures, and many cultures of which often harbor deep grievances toward your culture. I do see great potential for destabilization and difficult effects downstream of that type of decision making. And so I don't blame people for feeling that they have a right to say, hey, you know, at this point, this is our nation. Our borders were established for a reason. And, you know, we want to act in the interest of not destabilizing our nation and maintaining a reasonable level of cultural homogeneity so that we can continue with our culture that's been working well for us and we don't invite in a tremendous amount of potential destabilization and potentially antagonistic or violent actors, you know, as terrorist attacks like this do reveal. And at the same time, you know, to balance that out, though, America is a nation of immigrants. We're all immigrants if you go back far enough, basically, all over the world. You know, humans, according to science, you know, originated in Africa and then immigrated to the rest of the world. So there's plenty of upside of immigration, and there's plenty of amazing immigrants out there. But if a country wants to assert the right to not allow in unvetted immigrants and to vet everybody who's coming in and really look for, you know, kind of high integrity individuals with a clear, solid track record, I think that's completely reasonable. And I do think that Europe I do think the situation's questionable in Europe based on data points that I've seen, based on very, very frightening and disturbing data points that I've seen. I think the situation's questionable. And so I'm actually relatively heartened to see the American vice president bringing these topics to the forefront in this way. I don't necessarily resonate with everything the guy's saying or all the ways he's saying it, but damn, take some balls to do that. And I think he is holding up a mirror that is in many ways coming from the populace of Europe. I think he is speaking for many legitimate voices of European people who are feeling like, okay, hey, hit the brakes here. We're going really quickly in a certain direction that there's evidence may not be the wisest path to go down if we want to preserve, you know, a level of continuity and stabilization with what has been working well for us for centuries, you know. it's not a simple science to mix wildly different cultures. Not at all. Cultures can break, cultures can be destabilized, cultures can go in vastly worse or better directions. You know, according to your values, of course, but yeah, I think pointing to the will of the people and saying, look, what the people value, many of the people, is a certain amount of preservation, continuity, stabilization that is being threatened by an enormous influx of unvetted immigrants. And yeah, again, this is coming from, I'm literally an immigrant in Europe. I'm an American immigrant living in Europe because my wife is German and my daughter is German and German American. She has dual citizenship. We live in Europe. So yeah, I'm in favor of immigration, legal immigration. And I'm in favor of a people's right to say, hey, you know, this is the level of immigration and the amount of vettingness around immigration that makes sense to us. Yeah, generally, I like a lot of things about democracy. I think democracy has its challenges as well, but I think it's a lot of interesting points he's making. I think this is an important mirror that he's held up in this speech. So, yeah, I think yeah, I think I'll wrap up there. I think between the first part and the second part ended up playing basically the full speech. Yeah, maybe I let it play out for a couple more minutes here.
But I mean, I don't really see. It's not like a huge difference here. I feel like. What the fuck?
Facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single
Something
person.
unfair. Our current government in the UK has literally ignored grooming games out of fear of being called racist. It's absolutely disgraceful. There's no way it's that bad, right? Like, because the thing is, like, that's why I haven't gone hard on this, is because it's just so ridiculous. I can't even acknowledge that it's real.
Easy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally,
Asmongold's face.
Wow.
the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. And
Thought crime.
Just so you guys know, George Orwell was in, I think, Spain or something like that in 1936. He didn't go over to America and then write 1984. He was in Europe and he wrote it. No, he wrote 1984 in 1948 or 49. The book came out, and it was written, and part of it was informed in his experiences when he was in Spain in 1936. Somewhere around there. I could be off by a couple of years.
Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth.
I wouldn't even say it's retreat, it's repression. Yeah, like it's crazy. Like I wonder what a person is like that's defending this stuff. It's crazy. It's hard to believe because you've been enjoying your life, not troubling yourself with this bull crap. This stuff has been going on for a long time. Cancel culture in the EU is way worse than in the US. How would they actually enforce that? Well, who cares whether you can enforce it or not? If the law is on the books and the law is bullshit, then you've got a problem, don't you?
I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation.
I always find it very problematic when, like, we can always question, like, 9/11, the Gulf of Tonkin, Pearl Harbor, all of these other events, the JFK assassination, but you can't ask any questions about COVID back then.
I just won this poker tournament massive prize of $17.27.
That's very interesting.
But with an offer.
The moon landing,
just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership,
Can't believe he said new sheriff in town, bro.
but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Not so many claps that time.
Nope.
Oh. They didn't like that at all.
They're not liking it.
And then 3 people clapped.
Now we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election.
Straight up
based
canceled.
on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
It's a banger. Jeez.
I love this fucking guy, man. I really do. This is amazing. Holy shit. Yes, it's so fucking true. Absolutely. He's up there roasting him. And I love how he'll pause for applause. Oh, God. This is insane. Yeah.
Now, the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations.
What?
Now,
wait, what?
and I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now,
what? So some parties are just not allowed? Oh my God.
Oh, man. Asma's so good at reacting.
This is insane.
In our form, he's good at it.
So he's even calling out the event organizers at the... Yeah, absolutely. They're trying to ban AFD. In Germany, it's the AFD. Because anything not left is Nazi. Holy shit.
Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say, But when people represent, when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them.
I think he's completely right. How do you think that, like, how do you think that it's a good idea to just simply go and kick anybody out who disagrees with you? I don't understand that at all. They're shitty indeed. AFD is pretty dumb, though. Well, if they're so dumb, then have them go up there and talk, and then you'll prove them that they're stupid. If somebody's so fucking stupid, then just go ahead and let them talk. That's it.
Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election.
Yep.
Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target.
Nope.
And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent.
Yeah, of course.
We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
Sure.
But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people.
Banger.
Man.
Guy went off.
Man.
Vance just snapped.
This is the best VP ever. Bro, like, it's actually crazy. Like, this was the biggest comeback I've probably ever seen. A smart politician, holy fuck. Yeah, this guy is good, man. He's dissing the entire EU government from the stage. Yeah, and they have to sit in the audience. This man is the next president. I mean, I'll tell you, I would vote for him for sure. Like, I like him a lot. I think he's great.
Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you, nor for that matter is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that people are being suppressed. And he's making the U.S. looking at it from our perspective. America will stand alone in 4 years. Really? Because, like, I bet there's a lot of people in Europe that listen to this and they agree. And I feel like the more, you know, truck drivers that go in the crowds that happen, like, I feel like the only reason why people in Europe wouldn't agree in this is because Europe has tried to carefully construct a media apparatus that actively deceives people of what's really happening. I feel like that's the only case.
I think it's that, and it's just political correctness, man. People are so deeply indoctrinated into a view that says you cannot condemn, anyone, especially you cannot discriminate against people from other groups, other cultures, other races, that people don't even want to call this stuff out and make the connection of connecting it to immigration because they don't want to be perceived as racist. That is a massive force in what is directing that type of ignoring of this, or people not speaking out more about this type of stuff.
And the only explanation for why something like this would happen. Bullshit? Well, it's not though, right? Because like they don't report a lot of these things. They report them in misleading ways. They don't report on whether somebody is a migrant or not. Somebody who's trying to push a narrative like that and talk about it gets arrested. I mean, I don't know. I've seen all of Europe. Well, no, that's a great point. That's a great point. All of the places in Europe don't do all of these things, but there's enough of them to where there's a problem. The immigrants are American haters and they're going to take over the whole Europe within a few years. I don't know. It just, I mean, like from my perspective, it seems like Europe, like this is me, like as an American, what the fuck do I know, right? And I'm sure it's Europe.
Yeah, it's nice that he's making that point. I made that point earlier that, cherry picking a few examples of negative stuff happening does not at all accommodate for the whole of the continent of Europe. And many places in Europe are, extremely wonderful to live in many respects. Like Europe has it pretty damn good. And if a lot of Europeans like to cherry pick stuff that happens in the United States. And of course, there's tons of murders and awful shit, school shootings in the United States. And if you cherry pick stuff like that too, you can get the idea that America's just completely lost its way and is completely out of whack. And maybe it has, maybe you believe it has. That's a valid opinion to have. But yeah. At the same time, there's still many places that are wonderful to live in America, and I miss living in America in many respects. I miss my family. When I go home to Iowa, seems like it's barely ever changed. Small town Iowa is small town Iowa, and it's great. It's God's green earth out there. It's God's country, as they say, the heartland.
Europeans that are like, oh, America is like this or that, and I'm like, that's stupid. So if you're a European, you think that's fine. I feel like Europe is like massively fucking censored. And I think the government is like totally pushing this. And I don't even understand like what their end game is behind it.
If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going
like in my opinion, I feel like if you can't have free expression and the free marketplace of ideas, you can't have anything. You can't build off of anything. You can't plan anything. You can't base anything off of reality at all. So like if you don't have that, you don't have anything. And I can't see another way around that. Especially whenever they use like terms that are so loose and they just apply it to people that they disagree with. You're incredibly uninformed. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he gave a lot of examples, and I don't think that you would agree with those examples, right? I mean, unless maybe they didn't happen. Maybe he's all lying. There are 30 governments. What are you talking about? Yeah, I know. Obviously, like every government isn't the same. I'm saying the ones that are doing it are bad. Yeah, of course. I mean, logically, of course, that's what I would be saying.
to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course,
yeah.
My And that's a handy. You handy?
It's mine.
Then you handy.
Yeah, mine.
Okay. Let's see.